Lawmakers may have an agreement to end the Department of Homeland Security shutdown, but a vote will have to wait probably nearly two or more weeks, potentially longer. The Senate moved early yesterday to try again to approve the measure, which funds most of DHS while excluding money for Immigration and Customs Enforcement and some of Customs and Border Protection. The House, though, chose not to take up the legislation, leaving a solution out of reach and the agency closed until at least Congress returns from its 2-week recess later this month. On a private conference call with House Republicans yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson made it clear he has no plans to bring lawmakers back early and did not commit to a strategy moving forward. It's a bitter pill for Johnson, who called the deal, quote, a joke last week, but told Republicans there simply weren't any other options left other than going with the Senate's bill. House Democrats say they'll back this legislation, allowing it to pass the chamber easily if Johnson puts it to a vote. Yesterday, Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois and I spoke about this and the timeline for the bill. Watch what he said. This DHS deal is the deal that former Speaker Pelosi actually told me on Monday House Democrats would have voted for. So now that it's back, will you? And what's your understanding of the timeline here?
We're not clear at all on the timeline. I'm not sure we should be taking a victory lap or declaring victory. The bottom line is the Republicans are going to do anything to avoid reforming ICE. I mean, the reason we held out and the reason this mattered is because reforming ICE was extremely important to every American. So I don't see that happening if reconciliation works this way.
Want to bring in our political panel as we end the week. Former senior advisor for political engagement to President Biden, John McCarthy, is on set with me, and also with us, former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania. You know, Charlie, you and I were talking before House Republicans got on that conference call. It was yet another moment of frustration at the speaker. Many of these members feel like they are now being forced to vote for the very thing that was the opposite of what they said they would ever vote for because it doesn't include funding for ICE and border protection. I ask again, what must it be like to be a member of the House Republican Conference right now?
Well, Allie, good morning. Let me just say this. In politics, you'll never say what you will never do because you may end up doing it someday. And that's where we are right now. But for anybody who's been around for more than 5 minutes in Congress knows that when the Senate passes a bill, a contentious bill, under unanimous consent, that is without opposition, and sends it to the House, that the House is going to eat it every single time. Now, I get that the House was mad, and so they pitch a fit and they throw a tantrum. But that doesn't change the fact that this bill is going to be considered by the House. I said that when the Senate passed it, and I'm not at all surprised that the Speaker was forced to cave because he really didn't have any good options. So right now, the House, I'm sure the Speaker got an earful from the right wing of his conference, telling him why this is a complete capitulation and surrender. But that doesn't change the facts that this is the easiest way out, at least for now, and then they'll deal with reconciliation later, which is another story about whether you should use reconciliation for funding the government. But that's a separate argument.
Yeah, I do think that's a separate argument, but it's also sort of one of the realities of Congress right now, which is that you really only get somewhere if only one party is doing it, because bipartisanship in this landscape has become just so difficult. I also wonder, though, John, when you listen to Congressman Quigley there with me yesterday saying, yeah, this is good that we're reopening DHS, but it's not a victory lap for Democrats. I was fascinated by the fact that he said that, and he explained it later in the interview as they did this because they wanted guardrails on ICE. And while they are coming out of this with no future funding for ICE through this mechanism, they were already funded elsewhere, it's still not a new guardrail. There's nothing new on ICE.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Democrats are still going to be pushing for some more guardrails on ICE, and that's something that they have support from the American people on. But, you know, the important part of this, I think, is the Republican Party is now sitting back and having to recognize that we're in election season, and they need to decide whether that they're going to be cheerleaders for Donald Trump or a kind of co-equal branch of government that stands on their own. But I think that if you're trying to gauge out what a person is going to do, you should always ask what motivates them. And for House Republicans, the answer to that is going to be re-election, right? And, you know, I think that they see the same numbers that we do and their backs are up against a wall. And between now and November, you're going to see House rank and file Republicans, you know, start moving further and further away from Donald Trump Because at the end of the day, this is not because they found religion. It's because they're looking for self-preservation. They're looking to come back to the Congress come next November. So I think that's going to be the motivating force for them between now and then.
I think John brings up such an excellent point, Charlie, because I have been wondering when we will see House Republicans and even Senate Republicans, because you're seeing Thune now already start to do what he can to preserve Republicans' majority in the Senate. At what point do their own personal dynamics diverge from that of the president? They already have, but when do they start acting that way? Do you see it the way that John does?
No, I tend to agree with John that many Republicans, particularly those in competitive seats, are going to have to find some separation between themselves and the president. The president, I get it that many Republicans need the president to win their nominations, but in those competitive swing districts where where Republican base isn't large enough, these members need votes from independents and some Democrats to survive, and the president is quite toxic with those voters. So those voters in those competitive swing districts must absolutely separate if they have any chance of survival. Simply keeping their bases together is not enough to win. And so I think you're going to see more separation as time goes on, whether it's on the war with Iran, on tariffs, immigration, any number of issues, because it's all about survival, as John correctly pointed out.
So let's look at the war with Iran, right? Because, John, you say that when you were in the White House, national addresses like the one that Trump gave on Wednesday were rare. And in this case, it was one that didn't actually have anything truly tangible for voters to latch on to, right?
Yeah, I mean, evening addresses like this from a president are still so unique in American public life.
Yeah.
It's still one of those moments where the nation still kind of comes to a halt. People might move up their dinner plans a little bit to make sure they're home in time to watch the president of the United States. Exactly. But they're going to come together and actually watch what the president has to say. So you use them sparingly because that's what actually gives them the gravitas. And, Donald Trump, stood in that hallway, that iconic backdrop. I mean, there is some power to that. But I don't think he gained any political points out of this or really gained, any clarity to the American people on this. And I think that he's losing political support every single day on this issue, right? He's yet to provide, what the mission is. He's yet to provide, what the timeline is, and more importantly, how he's going to pay for it. And I think that if he's unable to do all of those things, American voters are going to sit back for a second and sit and say, well, I'm going to question the whole strategy. Why are we doing this in the first place?
And the fact then, when you layer on top of it the story, Charlie, that we started our show with, that we are at an active war with Iran with many valid questions to be asked about what the exit strategy is and what's been accomplished by it. And then on top of it, you're seeing the early beginnings of a potential wider shakeup within the administration. What word does that lend to the tone of this administration right now?
Well, I think this administration has put itself in a bit of a box. Strategically, somebody could probably make the case that, Iran has some leverage right now and that we might be a little bit worse off in the sense that the strait is closed, oil prices are up, the Gulf Arab countries are much more vulnerable. The rest of our allies in NATO and elsewhere are pretty damned angry right now. And so from a strategic standpoint, I think we've got some real challenges. And of course, Iran is still launching. That said, the United States Armed Forces has done a terrific job of degrading Iran's conventional military capabilities. That's true. But in many respects, I didn't learn anything from that speech other than he put down a timeline and really didn't give any clarity or any explanation about how we are going to reopen the strait, which, of course, is causing much of the economic pain. And so the Iranians feel like they've got some leverage. I'm not sure how the administration gets out of this right now. Setting down the timeline, I don't think was really smart because we don't know how long this is going to last. Because I think the Iranians are going to want to continue to inflict economic pain on the West for as long as they can.
And then, John, quickly, what do you make of the fact that against that backdrop, he's firing Pam Bondi and potentially others?
Well, I mean, for all of the volatility that Donald Trump provides, I think he's provided something constant, and that's that loyalty is a one-way street with him. So, I mean, I think the last, his first 4 years and the last, year plus in office has just shown that, he demands absolute loyalty. And then at a certain point, he's just done with you. So if I were advising the Republicans, I would sit and say, this should be a wake-up call for you. This guy's not going to have your back at the end of the day.
Not going to have your back at the end of the day, and yet demands loyalty from all of those in Congress as well. We will see when those paths begin to tangibly diverge. For now, Charlie Dent and John McCarthy, I thank you both for joining us. Have a great weekend.